our series of Office Essentials. Today, we're going to be talking about Excel. Um, Excel is something that's near and dear to my heart. It is something that Justin Kenny and I have been training people on since 2019. We've been helping people learn how to use Excel a little bit better, and today we're going to be covering a lot of stuff very shallowly. And what that means is I'm going to introduce you to a lot of concepts and ideas. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, there are a lot of tools and trainings available to dig a little bit deeper, but I want to show you that they exist and show you some ways that where you're using Excel that maybe we can use a little bit better moving forward. And as always, feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go through today's training. So why are we talking about Excel at all? So like yesterday, or well, last time when we talked about Outlook, it's because everyone's using it. Well, everyone's using Excel too, but they're using it in a different way that I've noticed. And that's as a one tool that does a lot of things. And the thing is Excel's built to do some things very well and built to do other things through a complicated series of kind of sortas. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about what Excel does really well and how we can do those, and then also talk about some of the ways that it doesn't do some other things well. So the things that Excel does really well. It's really, really good at data analysis, data manipulation, merging data. So handling data and using Excel to interpret that data. It's really, really good at that. But we also use Excel for a lot of things that it's not really designed to do. For example, a long-term collaborative data storage tool. So treating it like a database. It's not. There are other tools in the Office 365 suite that are a little bit better at that, like lists that we can access, or databases themselves when appropriate. It also can function as a collaborative project management tool or a to-do list, because templates exist online, right, where you can find them, you can use them. But that's also not really what it's built to do. There are other Office tools that are better at that. So things like Microsoft Projects, Microsoft Planner, To-Do. Planner we're going to be talking about later in the Office Essentials series. And we talked a little bit about To-Do and the checklist tracking stuff in Outlook. Oftentimes you can use Excel for intake or to function as a form. Microsoft Forms is once again a better iteration of that capability that we're going to talk about later in the series. Sometimes you can use it as an interaction-based dashboard. But where Microsoft really shines is using Power BI to do that, and we're going to talk about that later in the series as well. So these are all things to look forward to. And you could even use it as a notebook, or some people use it as a design tool, right, where you've got all this functionality relating to tables and you can put things where you want them. And if you're using it for note taking, there's OneNote. If you're using it for design, there's other tools to do these things well. So we're not going to be talking about necessarily how to do these things, but we are going to be talking about how to do those things. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about today. So fundamentally, we're going to be talking today about data sets, how we can handle them and process them, some basic Excel features that are really, really powerful and really can transform the way you work. So things like tables, formulas, and charts. We're going to talk about one area of advanced features, which is pivot tables. If you've never heard of a pivot table or you've never used a pivot table before, but you use Excel with some amount of frequency, it has the potential to radically change how you interact with Excel in a really positive way. We're going to do an exercise which will, I hope, change how you view data processing, and we're going to talk a little bit about best practices. So there are a lot of ways to import data into Excel. So a lot of you are probably familiar with copying and pasting. but there are a lot of ways to import data. So you can import data from text or CSVs, that's comma separated values. And using the import tool, it will take that data and break it out by different delineations, whether that be spaces, commas, periods, semicolons. It can parse data, not just let it be copied and pasted. And it can also pull information directly from databases. So if you have access to that database and you do some OMDB level stuff, you can directly pull data into Excel. You can also use it to create data. Now, you can use that to augment an existing data set, or you can create your own data sets. And there are powerful tools built into Excel that allow you to do that. So things like autofill, auto series. It does seem like Excel always knows what you want to do and then does the opposite of that when you click and drag it. But there's also powerful tools for data validation. So you can say this row can only function this way or select from this list. There's a lot of ways to ensure data integrity in the data that you're working with. And you can also customize the data with conditional formatting. So this is getting the transforming data from the Excel menus, and these are conditional formatting. So things like data bars, color scales, highlighting rules. It can really enhance your visualization in Excel, because ultimately what you're trying to do in Excel is gain a better understanding of the data you have on hand. It's for recording, but it's also for processing. And we're visual beings, and the ability to customize and conditionally format data can really help transform how we do that. So when I say tables, I don't just mean data sitting in sheets. There's a thing called a table that's built into Excel. You might have seen this format as a table button. That's one way of creating a table. Tables are unique entities in Excel. And whenever possible, when you're dealing with data, you want to try and have your data in a table. That gives us a couple of advantages. Number one, it allows us to filter and sort. So this is an example of a very, very small table where it's just one row of headers and one row of data. But when you create a table, it gives you some customization options. It lets you, again, stylize those tables. But the big thing is filter and sorting. So it'll automatically put filter and sorting capability at the top of every single one of those columns in that table. And it allows you to name the table. So basically, when I said it creates an entity, it will allow you to, by default, it'll do table 1, table 2, table 3, etc. But you can give it a unique name that allows you to find it and utilize it, especially when you are starting to access some of the more advanced Office 365 things that we're going to be talking about later in the series. It also opens up something called table references. So if you're experienced at all in building formulas in Excel, you are probably familiar with the format, right? So if I want to reference cell A2, I can say A2, or I can say money sign A, money sign 2 if I want to anchor that. Well, what tables allow you to do is they allow you to do table referencing. So it allows you to reference at contract, and it'll grab this row right here. And what that really allows you to do is you can transform that data and not lose those references. It doesn't break every time you make a change to the table or make it or move something around, because it's tied to the table and to the header, not to the specific location and the specific cell where something lives. So it's really powerful. And it also allows you access to something called a summary row. So you can see right here, one of the options is a total row right here. And what that does is it adds another row at the bottom of the table that can automatically compute things on that table. So if I wanted to average acreage for a bunch of different rows, I can add that to the bottom of this list. And if I do some kind of filter where I'm eliminating some of the data from the table, it will change to reflect what is in that table. So I can really quickly pull summary information from that table without having to build in new formulas, without having to do any sort of calculations. And again, if I filtered stuff, it doesn't matter that it moved the data because it's all in table references when I'm using arrays. Once you start using tables, you're very rarely going to find uses for individual cell references, and it makes working in Excel a lot easier because your formulas aren't always breaking. And speaking of formulas, so formulas are the best part of Excel. It really is what makes Excel special. It is the ability to transform the root data that you're dealing with. There are lots of ways that you can do that. There are lookups and mathematical equations and concatenations, and there are a lot of ways that we can get really fancy with it, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, to get information in the way that we want it. If you are new to formulas or you're not sure how to execute a formula, there's something in Excel, if you use the insert function, called the Formula Builder, and it will step by step instruct you in, like, XLOOKUP is a really, really powerful tool. It's basically a replacement for HLOOKUP or VLOOKUP because it can function for both. It can look left, unlike VLOOKUP, and it's also a replacement for index match if you're of the index match fans. So it not only will outline what you need, but it'll outline a description for the thing, so you know what you're looking for and you know how to build it, and it'll help you build a formula even if you've never used the equation before. Charts are something you're probably familiar with in Excel. It's really, really cool in that you can build charts that you can customize however you need, but you can also embed them in other Microsoft products, whether that be Word, PowerPoint. But even the visualizations that we create with charts in Excel work better with tables or pivot tables, which is something we're going to talk about right now. So what is a pivot table? Pivot table is basically a summary tool. It replaces a lot of manual work. And if you've ever worked in an Excel table with a bunch of breaks and summaries and then like spaces and then more data and then more summaries, and I've seen a million financial tables that look like this, right, with all those weird gaps, all those weird summaries. That's not ideally how you use that. The way you do it is you put the data in and then you use a pivot table to summarize that data. So what do I mean by time and effort saving? So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. Go ahead and open this up. So here's an example of a pivot table. This right here is, if you were in the if you've seen the Outlook training, you know I had usage volumes for Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Teams. And how did I calculate the overall usage through that time? Because I mean, this is the data that came out of that. Well, the way I did it was with a pivot table, and it was as easy as going in here, going to insert pivot table on a new sheet, and this is what a pivot table looks like. So it's a bunch of fields, and it's filters, rows, columns, and values. And what I was able to do is all I had to do is really check these items and then specify what rows I wanted to use. And you can see by just moving things around, you can really transform the way things are summarized. So basically, I averaged the usage statistics over the weekdays because I wasn't interested in weekends. So that was one area where I used an equation. So basically, I said, if it's a weekday, make it a 1, and if it's a weekend, make it a 0, using the weekday equation. If you're not familiar with how the weekday equation works, or you didn't know that weekday was an equation in Excel, that's where the formula builder can really help you. And I was able to in, oops. I'm just Control-Zing to do those mistakes. I was able to build this summary statistic in about 10 seconds. So I was able to figure out the average usage over 6 months for Outlook, Teams, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and summarize that with this raw data. So pivot tables are really, really powerful. Again, I would love to teach you how to do pivot tables, but Justin and I teach an entire course on that takes about a half a day on just pivot tables. So there's a lot to learn there and a lot to grow on. So, okay, buddy. Daddy's in the middle of the train. Can you your video and I'll take a look in a little bit?
I need some water.
Well, your water's on the table. Okay, can you go get it? All right. So for our exercise, let's go ahead and process some data. So this, for those of you that are familiar with it, is the state of Vermont pay chart. If you copy all this data and you want to put it in Excel, that's not great. That's not particularly useful. And you might say, okay, well, I guess I have to hand enter this data, right? That's the only way to really process that information. And that's not really acceptable. So what's a better way of processing that? So I'm gonna hop back in here. I'm going to copy this link and you're going to watch magic in action. So feel free to follow along at home. I will go ahead and post this link in the chat. It's over on the counter, buddy. Remember when we were making smoothies? Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and hop back in Excel. If you're on your home computer and you're available, go ahead and hop on Excel. And we're just going to go to create a new tab because we kind of ruined this one. And we're going to go ahead and say from web. And it asks us for a URL because we want to process some data. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste this link. And we'll just see what happens. So it will try and process that link and it will try and find any tables available.
Water.
Okay, good job, buddy. And it will show us all the data that's available. And you can see two different versions of this. One where it correctly picked this step header and grades, and one where it kind of sort of figured it out, but it was actually operating based on the web page, not the data table. And this is just a PDF online. This is not some sort of special data set. You saw what happened when I tried to copy and paste it. But you can either transform the data. So there's something in Excel called Power Query, which would allow us to modify this table. So I'm not really interested in these top two rows. So I can go ahead and I can, oops, this preview might be hold, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and remove these rows. So I'm going to remove duplicates. And I'm going to remove blank rows. And now we have just the straight up table that we want, and load and close. Now you can see the entirety of the data table that we were trying to process via copy and paste that was not working. And we have a full-on table. Now it's built on a query. Every time we run it, if that data changes, it will automatically change it in Excel. Can you sit down and finish watching your video, buddy? Daddy's almost done. Yeah? Can you go sit down, buddy? Daddy's almost done. What is it, kiddo? Go for it. All right, so that about covers that data transformation. And this is a live connection, right? Every time I run this, I can go ahead and refresh this query. So if I am referencing some data available online that might change, this will change as well. And all I have to do is refresh this query and it will automatically pull that new data. So if that link stays the same between multiple iterations of the pay chart, I will automatically update that. Now, I don't think that'll work because it says fiscal year 23 on it. But if we wanted to have a just pay chart file, we could just copy over the old file. And as long as we're referencing that, this data will automatically be kept up to date. So I just want to finish up with some best practices. So when it comes to Excel, use the best tool for the job. You've seen kind of how powerful Excel is at visualization, transformation. I want to encourage you to experiment with tables. When you're using tables, you want to avoid spaces or breaks in the data, because again, if we're going to be summarizing, using a pivot table is a much better way to summarize that data. So you can summarize data in other tables or sheets, preferably using pivot tables if you learn to use pivot tables. The other thing is learning to master the dot. So I don't know if you noticed it in Excel, when you click any individual thing, there's this little dot right here. And if you mouse over it, it turns into a little cross. Now this can be a really powerful tool. So for example, if we're going to go ahead and insert a new row here, and we just want to number these 1 through 30, I can just click here and drag. And I wanted it to number 1 through 30. By default, it decided that it wanted to copy cells. But if you just click on this little button here, you'll see that there are a lot of options here. And I want to fill a series. So instantly I'm able to number 1 through 28. So learn to master that dot. It's really, really powerful. It can iterate dates. So if we make it 1/1/2020, and then we try and drag it down, you'll notice that it's 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and it can iterate the dates. But if I want it to be 1/20 all the way 1/1/2020, you can fill days, you can fill weekdays, you can fill years. So 1/1/2020 through 1/1/2047. It's a really, really powerful button, and it works left, it works right. It can also modify formulas. So if you want to carry a formula through, you can do that. Learn to master that dot. Excel also lets you protect worksheets or workbooks to potentially prevent conflicts. So if you want people interacting in one sheet but not messing with some of the reference tables that you've built, you can password protect them so that you can still access them, still modify them, and you can even modify it down to the cell level, although that stuff gets a little bit trickier. And again, I just kind of wanted to showcase a lot of the tools and capabilities of Excel. I didn't go in depth enough to where I expect you to necessarily be able to do any or all of this. But there are lots of resources available online. If you're a State of Vermont employee, there's knowledgewave.com. If you are a State of Vermont continuous improvement green belt, you have access to Excel trainings that right now Justin's running, although Justin and I developed those trainings together. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube. There's a ton of stuff on Microsoft's site. There is basically a bottomless pit of Excel resources available. So I just wanted to kind of show you what's out there. So before I wrap up for the day, are there any questions or concerns that anyone wanted to fire at me, either in the chat or unmute? You can feel free to raise your hand if you have something.
John, I'm going to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
I find with Excel, like I've taken a bunch of classes and they've been helpful, but I'm one of those person that really kind of needs like the more hands-on work to really kind of make it soak in. Are there any classes you would recommend where they really kind of have you, do steps 1 through whatever, and then there's a whole series of practice work instead of just kind of watching it in theory where you can actually do it during the class?
Well, the class that Justin and I taught on Excel is one of those. It was very much an in-person sit down in the computer lab at the CAPS facility, working through workbooks and putting the stuff into practice. That said, post-pandemic, I'm not really sure what options are out there for in-person hands-on. I know that if you are an FPR and you need some help trimming up some Excel work that's going on, I know I'm helping Gabrielle in Parks, but I am available as a resource to help you grow and learn how to do new stuff in Excel, and also help you find resources to dig a little deeper.
Cool, awesome. Do you think at any point in time the in-person classes will be coming back?
That's a good question, because the online version of those Excel courses was not the same. And also at the time, those were available specifically to Greenbelt practitioners only. So you had to have a continuous improvement Greenbelt in order to be eligible for those courses, because the demand for those is really high. I think Justin is still doing them, and we could probably talk him into doing a department or agency-wide training specifically. I could talk to him about that, because there really is a lot to Excel that even I've worked with business managers who have been working in Excel for decades, and well, when I talk about the level of mind-blowing stuff that can be done with pivot tables, like if I'm interested in this data that comprises teams, I can, well, this isn't working because I'm online. I'm in the online version of Excel, but you can even like double click a pivot table and it will take you to a subset of the data that form the calculation for it. Like there are levels to this stuff. It goes deeper, and the more you understand it and the more tools you add to your toolbox, the more time you can save when you're trying to solve problems, but also the better the insights you can draw. So I'm definitely invested in trying to find ways to help people learn how to do stuff. Okay. Obviously, if there are any questions after this, feel free to reach out to me. I got some responsibilities I got to take care of, but I want to wish all the rest of you have a great day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for, which one are we on? What's the next one? Does anyone know? Planner. We're going to talk about Planner next. I'm really excited about Planner. So I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a great day.